Not too bad, honestly, though. Hold on, let me wet it down a little bit, maybe. Maybe that'll help it. Oh, it's unrecoverable today. It's unrecoverable today. Either way, I'm going to talk a little bit on this live stream. Trump refuses to listen to a federal judge. It doesn't matter what the hell the judge says, he is the president of the United States. Since when does a federal judge do all the power of the diplomacy, illegal immigrants, this or that? That's not the job of the federal judge. That is not the job of the federal judge. He doesn't just get to try to block the president every single time he doesn't like what he's doing. These are criminal, illegal immigrants in the United States. Now, Trump doesn't give a shit about the judge. He's a bona fide gangster, and if the judge says, no, don't send those illegals out of the country, don't do it, he's just gonna do it right before the judge even finishes filing the paperwork. And that's exactly what the man did.
Why would you say bring those people back to the country? It just doesn't make any sense.
So let's put it this way. Everybody knows the injunctions filed against this administration is setting all times of records.
Yeah.
They're doing everything possible to stop the total Trump agenda in a way in which is just stunning today. You talk about 64 injunctions out of the 127 nationwide injunctions. All since 1963 has been 127. There's been 64 just against Trump. He's only been in office for 2 months. So this is the way they're trying to stop it. So here's my point. We got to get more of these guys out. They're trying to Greenfield El Salvador. They know how to lock and hold brutal prisoners, right? We saw that whole system. $6 million, you can't go wrong. So this is a deal that Marco Rubio helped cut. It's awesome. So here's the thing: would it help if you just give the mini bios and the transgressions of these terrorists? 161 of them, 261 last week. Is that what the judge wants?
Why don't we just put him in the judge's house?
Deal. We have terrorists out of our country, people who are rapists, who have done heinous crimes. They're in another country now. There are 261 of them. We paid them $6 million approximately, according to July 11. It would cost so much more than if we had to house them here. And the judge, now people are calling for impeachment. Congressman Brandon Gill on X said, I'll be filing articles of impeachment against activist Judge James Forsberg this week, and Trump must run that necessary.
Well, in fact, the Department of Justice a couple of days ago wrote a letter asking Gill to vote him because of the way he has handled this case. Ultimately, there are people who say, look, those people, sure, they're
This is all that Trump wants to send back to El Salvador, the criminals.
And so that is why the president on Friday night signed that executive order invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, targeting those gang members. Ultimately, the president referred to it as an invasion, but is it a time of war? War has to be declared by Congress, and that is why this judge is going to have this hearing today. Go before a ruling, but ultimately that's what they got to decide.
So I also believe that it's the war on terrorism, and since the president declared them as terrorists, this is what he has to say.
What do you say for those who claim you're using a 300-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? It's not as old as Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
It's so ridiculous, you know? And look, the president...
Country isn't even 300-year-old, you fucking morons. 300-year-old law. The country isn't even 300 years old.
Secretary Austin was not able to do that for 4 years. People bring it up on it. You have Tom Holman sitting there taking questions, but just wait till Dan Bongino goes down. Dan Bongino was yesterday. Right. I'm Sneakers. I'm Ryan Kiley.
And I'm Amy Hart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox.
With a alleged gang ties are no longer in the United States. The Trump administration deporting them to El Salvador to their mega prison that comes as an Obama-appointed judge.
The screen's actually not broken, it's just the damn screensaver. I mean, the screen protector.
They totally turned the plane around. Trump didn't. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett joins us now. Greg, pretty dramatic stuff.
It really is, and I think the judge here, James Mosberg, has made several errors. First of all, he issued a temporary restraining order without so much as a hearing or allowing the Trump administration to utter a word. Second of all, the plaintiffs being held were in Texas. This is a Washington, D.C. judge. He doesn't have jurisdiction. And finally, the exclusive remedy here under that law is what's known as a habeas petition. It's not a temporary restraining order. Bozeman seems unbothered by that, and then he exceeds his authority, ordering planes returned to the U.S.
While they were in air.
Yeah, I mean, he has no authority for that. Once a plane leaves U.S. soil and is outside U.S. airspace, no judge has authority for that. So I think this is judicial activism. There's too much of that. Judges in the lower courts and the federal district courts allow their personal animus and political views to dictate their decisions and not the law. 137.
That's right. Judges do not care about the goddamn law. That's why I'd rather live somewhere where you can just pay them off and then deal with their bullcrap. Not saying that I do, but not saying I live somewhere like that where you can pay off them, but not saying I live somewhere where you can bribe people or pay them off, but
Protester who, as a 30-year-old graduate student, graduated to living in campus housing, came over from Syria, went to London, somehow got a berth into America's elite college, and then has created havoc since then. Now, he's being held in Louisiana at an ICE facility, and his lawyers are working hard to get him back into communication with him and give him his green card status and let him stay. Where does this stand?
the hell, he's a terrorist.
Green card holder does make you a lawful resident, but that's not a right. That is a conditional privilege. And one of the conditions is you may not support or endorse terrorist activities or a terrorist organization. And the evidence is that Khalil was doing just that. There's another law that says if the Secretary of State deems someone such as Khalil acting against America's national security interests, he can be evicted without a hearing. And that's what Marco Rubio says.
Other countries do it.
Squarely behind the deportation of Khalil, but of course, once again, it's being tied up in court.
Well, they need to show that he has some type of contact with Hamas.
No, you don't. The law says endorsing or supporting a terrorist organization or terrorist activities. And apparently the evidence gathered by our government is that, he was passing out flyers, photos of Hamas glorifying the hideous massacre on October 7th, 2023. That is supporting terrorist activity, no question about it.
Right, no doubt about it. It's interesting because there's more to come. It's not just Khalil. There are plenty of it in Colombia. They're investigating multiple powers in those countries. Certainly stop at the Right, thanks so much.
My pleasure, bro.
All right, I'm Steve Busey. I'm Brian Kilby.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
They can't do that, guys. They don't have the power to tell Trump what to do. He's not going to listen to the damn judge. That judge is a Washington, D.C. judge. These people are held in Texas. That judge is power hungry. Power hungry judges. They don't get to decide what Trump does. They're not the president of the United States. What do you guys think? Is that what the judge did good or bad? I think it's terrible. Why would you stop criminals from going to prison? I'm confused. How is that a good thing? Aren't you a damn judge? You put innocent Americans in prison for nothing. You want to stop an illegal immigrant from going to jail? Why? I barely did any crimes to jail. But you want to let a freaking illegal immigrant do all this crime and just let them free. That's just called power hungry. Power hungry judge. I'm sure Trump's laughing his ass off. The judge thinks he can stop him. You can't stop him, Judge. You can't stop him. That's Donald J. Trump. Judges already tried to stop him. They failed. All you're going to do is piss off Trump to the point you're going to get impeached, or you're going to lose your job and never get elected again. Trump announced he will revoke Joe Biden's Secret Service for his family. Sky News. Imagine getting paid to fight against Trump and just argue and shit and say lies about him. It would be crazy. I'm not gonna take the money, but that's just me. What the hell is this?
Alika Lebon, a British American of Iranian heritage. She's not Jewish, but she's become a compelling voice for Israel. She's in Australia at the moment, and I asked her why she turned to activism.
I started doing my activism for the Middle East after 2022, after the murder of Mahsa Amini in Iran, and then we had these uprisings happening in Iran. And at that time, it seemed like sort of like a localized event that was happening, a revolution that was going to change something within the Middle East. And then I think I started to realize that post October 7th, there was something else going on, and that was an attack on the Western world. It was an attack on Western values, Western civilization, which we've seen in Iran, which is exactly what led to the collapse of our society in Iran. And I saw that coming home again here now, the last home that we had to be safe. And so I felt like I had to sort of, it was my duty to speak up.
Yeah, you have that Iranian background, which makes you particularly sensitive to what's going on in Iran. So I've read before that you saw yourself previously as someone of the political left, if there was any side of
Shout out
politics
the
you favoured.
Iranians,
So,
they're not the
of
enemy.
the left, and obviously
It's just
a
the
woman, if we
Iranian
can make
government.
an observation in this day and age. Give me your thoughts
It's
then
called the
on
Islamic
why
Republic of
feminism,
Iran. They are the
why
enemy to the
leftist
people.
feminists in the Western world now don't seem to be particularly particularly interested in the rights of women in Iran and other Muslim countries.
Yeah. So in order to understand this, we have to sort of understand the history of Western feminism, which was originally rooted in actually pro-Western values. So it was about expanding individual rights. It was about expanding democracy, equalizing wages, things, all of the good stuff, right? And then after that, unfortunately, there was this sort of post-colonial movement that shifted Western feminism to being about anti-Westernism. So it was about how the West was the source of all evil in the world. It was the source of all oppression in the world. And so what happened beyond that point was that there was a history of Western feminists aligning with anything that was anti-Western. So at that time, we started to see the alignment of Western feminists with Marxists, with communists, with Stalin, with Mao, with Castro, and seeing all of these regimes as being some type of utopia, as an antithesis to the Western world. And then so what we're seeing now is just an extension of that long history of feminism turning anti-Westernism. And so now, when you get to October 7th, right, you see this brutal terrorist attack that's killing not just men, but women too. Where is
babies?
Shiri Bibas, right? Choking babies to death. And then these Western feminists are now forced to reconcile with these two conflicting things. You have this
More than 200 Venezuelans alleged by the White House to be gang members have
A
been
federal
deported
judge
from the
ain't
US
gonna
to
stop,
a
or whatever kind of judge, a state judge, whatever kind of judge, ain't gonna stop. This wasn't even a federal judge, this was a state judge, I believe, in Washington, D.C. They ain't gonna stop Trump's promises.
Order prevented the Trump administration to justify some of the deportations, but flights, well, they'd already taken off, and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied that the court ruling had been violated. It's certainly been extraordinary to see this play out. What's your reaction to it, and what's the reaction been in the United States?
Right. I don't think we've ever seen this kind of clash between the executive and the presidency against the courts and the judicial system here. I mean, what happened, just for viewers that aren't aware, is that this executive order was released on Friday afternoon, very discreetly, in case it got picked up any press. And then Saturday morning, it somehow leaked, and they got these illegal immigrants on board on the plane and took off. Now, the judge's orders came somewhere over outside of the American territory, so there is some dispute as to whether this was over international waters. But one thing is clear, is it's really putting Democrats and critics in a slightly strange position where they're having to defend illegal immigrants and people who had actually committed a crime.
They're defending criminals. Not only are these people actually criminals because they came into the country illegally, they're criminals because they raped and murdered U.S. citizens. It's been proven. And they don't want these people to be deported? What kind of crack are they smoking? Anyway, guys, welcome into the live stream. Let me know where you guys are coming from. Inside the United States, outside the United States. I'm coming from outside the United States right now, so if you guys are just waking up in the morning, good morning. I know it's about 6 a.m. on the East Coast. Even earlier on the West Coast. Don't know if you guys can tell where I'm at. Probably not, you'd never guess. It's been breezy, it's breezy. I guess I can reapply on YouTube for monetization now, but why the hell would I want to do that when they're just going to deny me for nothing?
On the right track, and they say that it's on the right track now than in any other point since 2004. This is according to a new NBC poll. Let's take a look.
The mood of the country. This really jumped out. We asked folks, is it in the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44% who say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004.
It's interesting, James. What do you make
Under
of
George
this
W.
figure,
Bush.
Trump's approval rating? I thought it was going to, I suppose, dip when there's been so many controversial decisions, but it's pretty high.
It's also worth noting that that clip is from NBC, which is sort of the liberal outpost for all these kind of things. So if they're admitting to it, that certainly counts for something. I think the key thing is that the fundamentals are looking pretty good for Trump, despite all the noise, as you allude to there. Border crossings, illegal border crossings, are down 96%. There's a feeling that the migrant crisis is passing in a lot of American cities, and he's speaking to Putin on the phone in the next few days. If he can miraculously pull together some kind of agreement between Ukraine and Russia, well, that's another huge tick in his box. So, again, a lot of the things are actually looking quite good for him. And just to add to that, the fact that we have food prices...
Fuck Bill Burr. He's an idiot.
Dropping pretty markedly at the moment. So, again, all these factors are looking pretty good, despite all the...
What the hell does Bill even do? I thought that dude was a comedian or something.
The fundamentals are actually pointing in the right direction, and the public is rewarding him for that.
And I want to get to what is happening with Ukraine and Trump's discussions with Putin, which is coming up. But first of all, I just want to check in on what the story is for the Democrats, because it's a completely different story for them. The New York Post phrased it: the Democrats have become so unpopular, more Americans believe that aliens are among us than agree with the Democratic Party. Well, doesn't that sum it up for you? But two new polls out this week show that the party has hit historic new lows in approval ratings for them nationwide. Just 27% of Americans say that they like the job that Democrats are doing, according to NBC News, and a CNN poll put favorability at 29%.
A Washington, D.C. judge doesn't have jurisdiction over Texas.
They've been so weak for a while. But
so how can he tell Trump what to do there?
No, and I also think that's partly why Donald Trump's rating is looking so strong at the moment. It's as much a reflection of Democratic weakness as it is of Republican strength. The issue is that the party can't even seem to coalesce around a single message, let alone a single leader. I don't know if your viewers saw this, but there was another poll that came out quite recently that asked, who is the leader of the Democratic Party? Obviously, it's not Joe Biden anymore. And there was a complete divide as to who they were. It was sort of 10 or 15 characters. And who was top of that list? AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, with 10% of that vote. And she is never going to be winning any elections. And if that's who they want as their sort of party figurehead, then the Democrats are in real trouble. And it just goes to show with that whole backstop dealing, the shutdown with Chuck Schumer and the leadership crisis that's led to. The Democrats really just do not know where to go at the moment. They just cannot find a single message to work on.
Yeah, there's no attack line that's strong at all. Donald Trump, though, he is delivering more promises. The JFK files are set to be released. We're going to see around 80,000 pages of files. They are going to be made public. Donald Trump says that there won't be any redactions. This, of course, has sparked a huge amount of interest among people right around the world. What can we expect, though? Do you have high hopes from what we're going to see
Not
tomorrow?
really, no.
Well, I don't want to get my hopes too high because I have to be honest, I thought the Epstein file release was pretty disappointing.
Yeah.
I know it's coming in several phases, but there's a lot of hype and not much result at the moment. But look, I'm excited that this kind of thing is actually happening. This wouldn't have even been countenanced under another presidency, Republican or Democrat. So I am hopeful. I think with people like Kash Patel and RFK in the cabinet, there are no sort of institutional resistors to this kind of program.
We need to break government trust. The government isn't here in the U.S. to, just help you, coddle you, be your best friend. They're not. They've hurt the U.S. people multiple times throughout history. You can't trust them.
I'll be watching that with a very eagle eye.
Yeah, I think we all will be. Finally,
And if there's proof that the government killed one person, then that'll break people's trust.
Situation in between Ukraine and Russia. President Trump will be speaking with Vladimir Putin. He says the discussions will include talking around land, power plants, and dividing up certain assets. US officials have expressed optimism that a ceasefire deal could be reached, maybe even in weeks. This is what Donald Trump has had to say.
See if we have something to announce maybe by Tuesday. I'll be speaking to President Putin on Tuesday. And a lot of work's been done over the weekend. We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we have a very good chance.
So the ball's really in Russia's court. It's going to be very interesting to hear about how these discussions go between Trump and Putin. What's your feeling about it?
Right. I mean, that expression you just used there, bull in Russia's court, that is exactly what Secretary of State.
So these stories are intended to exploit people's feelings, but nowhere in the stories do they tell people that just last fiscal year alone, improper Medicare payments reached an estimated $54 billion. Let's repeat that. Improper payments that shouldn't have been made in the first place.
Nah, Trump
That's
is
what
going
the
to
Trump
kill all the
administration is going after.
Elon is going to kill all the
How many
Medicare
times
for
does
the
the president
elderly.
need to say it?
So they won't be able to
I'm not going to touch
go
Social
to the
Security,
doctor anymore,
Medicare,
and then they won't be able to
Now,
eat
we're gonna get
anymore
fraud out
because
of
he's going to
this.
get rid of the
Social
Social
Security will not be
Security,
touched
so
at
they're
all.
not
Let me
going to be able to go to the
strengthen. I have said
doctor
it so
and they'll
many
starve
times, you
to
shouldn't
death.
be asking me that question. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that.
No, we're not
Joining
okay
us
with
now,
that. Hell
the
no. We're
great
going to
Steve
riot,
Wall,
blow up
committed to
Tesla
unleash prosperity,
dealerships,
co-founder and co-author
everything.
of
Just
the
because
Trump
Elon said
Economic
that.
Miracle. Steve, it is great to see you. I mean, this record never changes, does it? That any kind of attempt to actually deliver value for money for taxpayers is branded as a cut.
Great point, Steve. And so you're exactly right that if you look over the next 5 years, Medicaid is expected under the Republican budget to grow by 3%. I think that's outrageous. This is a program that's grown by 50% over the last 5 years.
No, it's a lie. Trump said himself out of his own mouth he's going to kill it for all the old people.
Way too
He's going to
much
get
on
rid of
this
it.
program, if you ask me. Why should we be increasing a program's budget when, as you just said, Steve, the amount of fraud in the budget for Medicaid is about $125 to $150 billion. Now, I want to make another point about how Medicaid is ripping off people. The state that I think you're from California.
Exactly.
I know you live there.
I was about to make the same point, but you beat me to it.
I hate to take a shot at your state, but did you know California this year is scheduled to get $125 billion from Medicaid. So what is happening in Wisconsin is Gavin Newsom is signing up everybody he possibly can in the state for Medicaid. You know why? Because the federal government pays 90% and the state only pays 10%. So that Gavin Newsom sees this as a way to just flush money into the state of California. It's being ripped off. The program has to be re-engineered. And by the way, Medicaid is the worst medical coverage in the country. People who have Medicaid coverage have no better health outcomes than people who don't have any health insurance at all.
It's actually worse than that because California is using a loophole that allows them to essentially money launder. They're siphoning money. They tax managed care providers, but this is not an actual contribution that the state makes to Medicaid, but they somehow largely get reimbursed for it. And if they close the loophole in Washington, it will save $630 billion from this grip.
So can I just make the point that you've got now pretty much half the residents of California on the program that's supposed to be for the very, very poorest. And on top of that, guess what? They've just asked for an emergency loan, Gavin Newsom has, to fund it. Why? Because they last year gave it to illegal immigrants who shouldn't be in the country in the first place.
And so the federal taxpayers are also footing the bill for illegal migrant Medicaid, which is illegal at the federal level, but he's managed an end around to get that done. Don't get me mad. The show just started. This also made me mad because social media went after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent for delivering a hard-hitting reality check to all the tariff critics, reminding them what the American dream is really about. Steve, listen to this.
The American dream is not living in flat screens.
But how the hell can we not investigate people like Gavin Newsom? There's petty criminals, they get millions of dollars of taxpayer money to investigate them, but we can't investigate the rich politicians like Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom.
And we are focused on affordability.
Like, I know Trump's president, but what the hell?
People all over social media went after the Treasury Secretary for saying it's not about let them eat flat screens. But that is exactly what, Steve, politicians and corporate executives and the big money donors did to the American people. And they did it to the people with whom I grew up. And we realized that China was the enemy and that all of these individuals were the enemy 40 some odd years ago because they unbolted our factories, packed them up, and told us all that our lives would be better and that we would be retrained and we would have better jobs, but we got sold. That we traded for flat panel TVs. That's all we got, an inflatable crap in our front yard. All we got is driving 4 hours round trip to a receptionist job paid for by, you got it, Medicare and Medicaid. That's what we got. So bravo to the Treasury Secretary, Steve.
Yeah, look, if people are concerned
the Chinese
about
are the
falling
ones that
incomes,
keep
and I
Americans
am, I
poor
know
and dumb.
the two of you are,
They make you buy all their shit, and then when 10 or 20 years goes by buying shit on Amazon, you don't have any money anywhere put away left over for yourself. All you're doing is buying random shit from fucking China.
Trump, almost everything he is doing, whether it's deregulating the economy, cutting the taxes, finding the waste in the federal government, all of these things are going to help middle-class America. They're going to raise wages and salaries. Look, just compare what happened with Trump versus Biden. Trump was president for 4 years, and the average family had a $6,000 increase in their family income. Under Biden, the average family lost $1,000. So if you want to help the middle class and struggling families, Trumponomics is the way to go.
Exactly. Thank you, Steve Moore. That's exactly right. And I think the interesting thing about this story, Tegan, is the fact that there's an underlying depth of intellectual change going on here with these tariffs and all these America First policies to actually rebalance the economy away from cheap imports in favor of producing things here that are of value and create valuable jobs for Americans.
Yeah, Steve, final word, you're nodding, but the federal government told the people in my area of the country in Southside Virginia that they would protect our way of life and protect the patents on the furniture that we used to manufacture and the textiles, and they lied, and it enriched their donors.
Well, we're going to bring investment back to these areas. There's no question about it. We're going to rebuild these communities that were lost. Remember when Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden basically said, "Well, yeah, all the coal mining jobs are going to be gone, but you can build windmills." Remember that? You can build solar panels. And they're like, "What are these people talking about?" They're so out of touch with the middle class.
Even Barack Obama.
Donald Trump feels their pain.
Even those two were fucking smarter than the new age Democrats that are coming at us nowadays, like Kamala Harris.
Thank you for joining us, Steve. Great
and all
to see you
these
today.
crazy senator people. Anyway.
Pen is mightier than the sword, but the auto pen is not. President Trump declaring that the pardons issued by former President Biden, including those for the January the 6th committee, are void.
The president posting on Truth Social, quote, the pardons, and that's in quotations, that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by AutoPen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them, exclamation point.
And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt echoed the president's sentiments.
The president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents.
Dagan, I watched that briefing. My favourite part was when Caitlin Collins from CNN says, well, have you got any evidence for this? And Caroline Levitt says, well, you're a reporter, you find out. Exactly. Anyway, for more, let's bring in Article 3 Project founder and president Mike Davis. Mike, what do you make of this? Should these pardons be voided?
Well, I would say this, America learns you probably shouldn't elect a demented president, so we shouldn't have to have this discussion. But the reason we're having this discussion is we had demented Joe Biden. So look, politicians use auto pens all the time. House members, Senate members, presidents. The issue here is not the use of the auto pen. It's whether the auto pen was carrying out what the president wanted signed. If it was carrying out the president's will. If you're carrying out the president's will, these pardons are valid. If you're doing this without the president's knowledge or worse, against the president's will, these pardons are not valid. And how you test this is you would have to bring charges against people who were pardoned. The defendants would raise the pardon in court, and then you would litigate whether the pardon is valid in that court.
Do you think it legitimately goes that way to prove whether Joe Biden was, in essence, either he was cognitively aware of what he was doing or disconnected and thinking about something else like pudding?
Well, look, after Joe Biden and his administration went after Trump, his top aides, and put him in prison, his supporters on January 6th, that we politically persecuted parents, Christians, let's roll the dice. Let's give it a shot and see if these pardons are valid or not. Maybe we can start with Hunter Biden.
I think there's a broader point here as well, which is just generally what happened during that administration that was not really done, led, initiated by the person that Americans thought they were elected. We see stories coming out now about the fact that he had to have scripts for meetings with his cabinet secretaries. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There should be a broader investigation into all of that. Another aspect of the changes we're seeing right now, President Trump is slamming a judge who ordered the federal government to reinstate thousands of fired workers.
Well, I think it's absolutely, I have nothing to do with that other than I heard about the decision. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. It's a judge that's putting himself in the position of the President of the United States, who was elected by close to 80 million votes. And you have that, having more and more of that's a very dangerous thing for our country. And I would suspect that we're going to have to get a decision from the Supreme Court.
Mike, you're a very serious constitutionalist. What do you make of this argument now, where you have these judges asserting their authority, the executive branch saying, no, sorry, this is our responsibility. Where do you come down on this?
President Trump campaigned on the fact that he's going to hire Elon Musk, he's going to set up Doge, and they're going to go clean out the waste, fraud, and abuse in the executive branch. And President Trump is doing the unthinkable. He's actually doing what he promised voters he would do. He is exercising core Article 2 power, executive power under the Constitution, and these activist judges are sabotaging him. The recourse for fired employees is to go to the Merit System Protection Board. It's not to run to a left-wing radical activist judge and get reinstated against the president's will. This is clearly unconstitutional. It must get fixed on appeal.
And before we go, the judge's ruling related to the removal of gang members, Trinidad Aragua gang members, out of the country. Carrie Urban was talking about this. This is, in essence, an interference by one judge, by the judiciary, in the execution of national security, immigration, and foreign policy by the executive branch. Never granted the power. I mean, that is a very dangerous step. Final word, Mike.
That is why I am calling for the impeachment of D.C. Obama Judge Jeb Boasberg. He's sabotaging the President of the United States. He held a hearing during the middle of a national security operation.
All right, that's it for today, guys. Peace out. Thanks for watching.